Hi Oliviero, hi Alessandra, hi Aurora. Thanks for being
Hello,
the guest
everyone.
for like this episode, Oliviero. I think we met probably 1 or 2 years ago when we were like building your company here in
Exactly.
San Francisco, and then you also like came back as a like founding engineer of a YC startup. So I don't know if you want to start a little bit of why is it important to be like here in Silicon Valley, the serendipity that you can get from like living here, from like doing a program like Y Combinator.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. Great opportunity to be here. Great fan of Silicon Valley Fellowship and all the work you do here. This is great. So, I'm Oliviero Pinotti, originally Italian. I've kind of a particular path because I studied something completely not related to tech, but we can get to that later. And I dived right deep into tech, so much so that through various experiences, right now, as you said, I'm a founding engineer at the Y Combinator startup. And well, actually, yeah, we met. I think 1 year ago in August of 2024. I think in San Francisco, and San Francisco is single-handedly the place where you can have the biggest surface area of luck if you're trying to do anything exceptional in tech, in the world of startups. And it came very apparent to me when I came there to attend an event of Y Combinator, which was one of the first ways I got into touch with them. Well, of course, I had already seen the videos, but seeing them face to face was, of course, an extraordinary experience. And I got right there and then how important it is to be there just because of the raw concentration of incredible talent, ideas, and people who actually understand what you do, which is one of the biggest problems I would say in any other place except San Francisco.
And like when you came back from that, what did you do? Like what did you take from that experience at Y Combinator,
So
and how did this shape your your path?
I think it definitely changed my perspective quite a lot, right? So in Europe, we are very constrained to like a very limited set of ideas, and very often we don't see the problems that big enterprises have because very often students they are just relinquished to the type of problems that they see in university, right? So very often a European startup is going to be some type of consumer startup, which is very usually what at Y Combinator they call it target idea. So a pool that many people want to draw ideas from, right? But very often turn out to be ideas that somehow, seem too good to be true, right? And so what I understood when coming back is that actually most people that I knew in startups were working on such types of ideas, right? And so I was thinking, well, okay, so here we have a wake up call, right? So we need to work on very hard problems, right? That actually users have, right? So, the idea of, well, oh yeah, it's so difficult to organize events at my universities with my friends, right? This is an idea that almost all of us have had, right? Like, oh yeah, I would like an app where I can see all of the events in my university, where I know exactly when I can hang out with whom, right? This sounds on principle a good idea,
Or
right?
another social network or like a dating app that are
Right,
like usually
exactly.
there for
It all
sales.
sounds like great ideas on paper. However, when you actually go and try and validate them, they almost always fail, right? And this is the common characteristics of target ideas. So I think that was the first learning. The second learning was that you just have to work way, way harder than everybody else. Like one of the key to success in a startup, I would say, is just outworking everybody else, right? And in Europe, we have this, I would say, rather relaxed culture about work, where already working 10 hours a day seems something crazy, right? While in San Francisco, as I'm sure Eric knows at his own expense, 10 hours gets you barely anywhere, right? So in that regard, I think it's rather important to get adjusted to the American working culture, right? Which is definitely much harder, but definitely produce much better result. Yeah.
And like initially, you said that your background was not like into tech and
Yeah.
this stuff. So maybe you can say a little bit what you did before and how, of course, you arrived in this other industry.
Yeah, 100%. So actually, I studied at EHL, which is a hospitality management school here in Lausanne, Switzerland, where I am right now. And actually, so I was studying hospitality because, well, my family is in this business. And so I thought I'd liked it. And I did for a certain period of time until I came into my first year and I was studying these subjects. And I kind of realized that I was not really interested at all. And what I was really interested in is actually building startups and solving problems. While I do think that it did teach me a couple of things about, speaking to people, consumers, and that was actually very useful. It's actually how I got started with my first startup, which was called StudyBud. And basically, StudyBud was a tutoring marketplace for students. Now, the kind of edge that we had compared to all of the other existing tutoring platforms is that we would get you students and tutors from your same university who had done exactly your same courses with exactly your same professors. So basically, that would create kind of a cheat code because, of course, the people tutoring you is not just some external professor, it's people who know exactly what is on the exam and, of course, can optimize for making you succeed there. So that was the first thing, and well, I was incredibly lucky that I found some people to work with, and then we scaled actually a little bit. I think by the end we had served more than 1,000 users. We've given, I think, at least 5,000 hours of lessons, something like this. So
So not only like in your university, like also in other
yes, yes,
universities.
we were in a couple of universities here in Switzerland, indeed, yes. And so yeah, that was a great experience. I was 18 at the time, so of course learned a lot about like just how to incorporate a company, how to choose co-founders, and how to go about all of these things where you create your first company, right? Like even receiving the first payment was kind of a wow moment for me, right? I was just like, wow, what is happening here, right?
But did you do that only because you knew the right people there? You found the right people, or were there courses maybe at your university that helped you do this? Because sometimes people want to start a company but actually don't know where to start. Also with the coding part, did you learn how to
So
code?
Hey, in fact, like you realized the app, or you had like a friend of yours that was doing
So
that part?
at the very, very beginning, I had a company whom I worked for who created kind of a mini MVP. Although I realized pretty quickly that that does not work, right? And in Europe, it's a very common concept where you see some startups which are made purely by business people whom have no conception of what the technical side of their idea looks like. And they think, oh, well, I'm a business person, right? So I can hire some technical people, right? So, for example, a development company to get my idea done, right? And on paper, that sounds right, except that when you think about it, you're actually outsourcing your core competency, your product, right? And that's when you look at it in SF, that's an absurd conception, right? And so when I realized that myself, I said, well, okay, now I need to get in business with some actually technical people. So actually what I started to do is I started to secretly hang out at the Polytechnic of Lausanne, actually. Basically all the free time I had, and also some of the class in which I should have been in class, to be fair. And I was there, and basically I taught myself how to code. And then I made a better version of the application, and so on. And we learned a lot of things. We learned a lot of things. I even the funniest thing, I even did my own internship, right? So we can basically do a mid studies internship, and I did that in my own company, and that taught me even more because when you are, when you do an internship, right, in a company, right, and like that it's gonna finish in 6 months, right, the stakes are kind of very limited, right, because you're not really super invested, right, anyway it's a temporary thing, right, you're learning some things and it's fun, right, but like you're not really hardcore into it, right, while if you're doing 6 months of an internship in your own company, right, the success of you being able later to record this as a successful experience is entirely up to you, and what you do is entirely up to you, and you getting up in the morning and showing up at the office and making things which are right off the company are entirely up to you. And that puts a very, very strong pressure on you, especially when you're, I mean, supposedly in a university internship, you're relatively young, right, 18, 19. But I think it's a great experience because it teaches, I think, a lot of like tenacity, right, and like there was also a lot of dark days where I was just in front of my computer, right, and I was like, well, what's it going to be now, right, like what do we do now, right? So, and there's nobody to tell you, right, there's nobody to tell you, right, and especially back then I didn't know about Y Combinator, I didn't know anything, and I didn't even know any people in this industry, right? So it was all very lonely, as is often the life of founders. So yeah, but great learning experience.
And so Lausanne was also a good place to start. Like, how was it that in that moment when you started a startup? Also, compared to San Francisco when you came after with the Y Combinator? What was the differences?
Well, Lausanne, I mean, Switzerland is great because they have a lot of like programs that help you, like for example, with grants, right? So they give you some initial funding, and they're quite friendly with that. Now, of course, the thing is like Europe has all of these disadvantages, right? Which we said before, right? So I would say like the most important disadvantage beyond, right, like the taxation rules, beyond like how easy it is to incorporate a company, right? So here in Europe, you have to have a notary, right? We need to do like all of this crazy stuff, right? To just open like a simple company, right? While in Europe, it's just like 3 clicks, which I can do from my phone at a restaurant. I would say that the most important thing is the mindset, right? So here, I'm going to go to somebody, I'm going to say, yeah, I'm doing this startup to solve problem X, right? And then they're going to tell me, well, like they say, oh yeah, that's interesting, right? But like, they don't really believe that it's feasible for you to do this, right? Like they don't really believe that it's such a thing, like that you just like go out there and you make a company right out of nothing, right? Like most people will just not believe in you, right? While if I go to San Francisco right now and I take a new idea out of my head, completely new done, I can bet you that in the range of a week, I will not only have people who think that what I'm doing is cool, but probably even investors, right? Which in Europe would take like months on end, right? I mean, just here, I tried here raising in Switzerland, and it's an incredibly cumbersome process because we have investors which are extremely risk averse, right? They propose deals which are out of this world to compensate for a risk that is just like, it's not that it's non-existent, but it's just common among startups, right? You cannot expect a startup to compensate you like irreasonably just because you think that the risk is too high, or it's just a different investing world, right? And it should be treated as such. But the thing is, we just don't have this type of education mentality in Europe, I would say.
Yeah. So you think like the Y Combinator was determinant, for the success of that startup, right?
For sure.
And how was the process like to have the one like the Y Combinator winter batch of 2024? How did the startup
Oh,
actually?
I wasn't yet at the company, right? So of course I cannot speak about that, but of course I can speak by but the whole experience as a whole, right? So I talked. So maybe I'm just gonna give a bit of context right now for the viewers who maybe don't know what Y Combinator is. So Y Combinator is an incubator, accelerator, as well as a venture capital fund which invests in early stage startups. So even startups which almost have not an idea, or even just an idea and no revenue, right? And they've been doing this for 20 years. They're in San Francisco, and basically they are, I would say, some of the most successful funds in doing so. And the peculiar thing about them is that the only thing that you need to do to get into this accelerator is fill out a form, have a 10-minute interview, after which you will get access to an incredible network of founders, most of which are extremely exceptional people at the very top of their field, as well as $500,000 for some reasonable terms, considering the average traction that the average startup that enters Y Combinator has at that point. And I've had the opportunity to talk with several partners, right? And I really like that you talk to them, and they have no preconceptions, right? They speak and they think in this very first principles manner, right? Which makes them incredibly unbiased about things, and when you and so they will never assume anything about you, right? About your background, right? So even when I spoke with a partner, and he told me, perhaps I should get some education in computer science, right? To make my education more official, right, and so on, because I studied hospitality management, right? And he told me, well, do you know how to code? I said, yes. Do you know how to build products, and talk to customers? I said, yes. Well, then you have all you need, right? And they really are in this very hands-on approach, which I think is extremely useful. And the counterpart of that is in Europe, where you have very often business advisors who will suggest you, oh, you should do a 5-year forecast of your financials, right, into the future, because you need to know exactly how many full-time employees you're going to have in 5 years, while your idea is not even validated yet, right?
So like the only thing that you have to present there is like the idea and not maybe, for example, how to implement it, or they're also maybe is gonna ask if you have any ideas of how to do that, how to maybe ask for investors.
I mean, of course, right? They need to be convinced somehow that you have the technical skills to achieve that idea, right? So you've never written a line of code, you've never worked in software, you've never done any project, right, that can show somehow that you have the capability to achieve this, right? Then they will reasonably, like, say, well, probably you're not the right person to do this, right?
Yeah.
Um, so they probably want to see that for sure.
Okay. And so sorry, I don't recall. Like you go there alone, or you already had a team?
So usually, no, we you always go with a co-founder,
Ah,
right?
we
So
are
usually you
co-founder.
you and your co-founder you join right together. Well, the team doesn't really go to Y Combinator itself, right? I mean, the location, right, so to speak. But I mean, they're still part of your company, right? So yeah.
And was your co-founder also in your same sector, or did he have other skills that
Oh,
maybe complemented the
I
one?
should just precise, I'm not a founder of this company, right?
I know, yeah, like in
Yeah.
general. So with
In
your
general.
previous
So,
startups,
yeah,
like
yeah, for sure. Well, with my previous startup at StudyBot, so yeah, I had an engineer. So he was actually a mechanical engineer, actually, who turned to tech. Actually, I mean, the thing that matters, right? And I think this is like an important message for like especially, yeah, I mean, young students who are viewing this, right? Like, don't focus. Like, it's important, of course, to get good grades at your courses, and like make your parents happy and all this stuff, right? But like, the thing that really shines is when you can produce projects, perhaps even open source projects. There's something they're interesting, right, to kind of showcase what you're building, right? And these are exactly the type of things that like Y Combinator looks for, right? So having very high agency, right, and like going out there and proving practically that you are who you describe, right? So having a fancy bachelor, right, will just not cut it, right? So you got to show that you're practically good, right? And building a lot of projects will not only give you that, but it will also show whoever maybe an employer or maybe Y Combinator itself, that you have like a certain track record, and will make you learn way more than any course can.
Can you
Okay.
maybe like expand on the journey that you had from like being
Sure.
non-technical to kind of like learning how to code, especially nowadays there is like this vibe coding or like maybe there are so many different options, right? That you can
Absolutely.
I don't know, like make your hands dirty and like being like more hands-on. So otherwise many people maybe they get stuck in the tutorial
100%.
hell and they start doing like YouTube videos after YouTube video, but then you never
Exactly.
like build something that
Right.
is like out in production.
So this is a very wide topic, right? So there's like one and a million one ways to do this. Now, what I focused on, so I realized pretty early on that YouTube videos, Coursera, Udemy, all of these kinds of stuff is completely useless, for lack of a better words.
perfect.
Now, here I'm doing, of course, a bit of a generalization. There are some cases where it's useful, but at the generally, especially with programming, it's much better to be hands-on. So what I did is I read a documentation of Python at the beginning. So I just went through the main documentation of Python, right? And a lot of it read like Chinese, right? So I was just reading like line by line, and I wasn't understanding like 60% of it, right? But it at least helped me to kind of get a general, idea, right? So I understood the basic syntax, right? I understood like what are classes for, right? Like all of these basic things about Python. And then I said, okay, now let's build a basic project, right? So of course the classic thing here is the to-do app, right? That you build. So I used a tool called Streamlit, and basically the great thing about Streamlit is that you can kind of abstract the front end, right, and only focus on the back end, right? Because many of my friends who were very talented engineers, and so this is another tip: get talented engineers as friends, right? This very much helps because they're going to be able to tell you exactly what is important and what is not important to learn, especially at the beginning.
Mhm.
All of them told me focus on two things: databases and backend, right? These are the two most valuable things in any tech company, right? Front end is less important, or let's say it's very much outsourceable, easier to do, right? Much faster. But databases and backend, like the way your algorithms and your data flows into your application, is actually the core value of it, right? So I started to read a lot about databases, and I started to do projects which required, more complex database operations, right? So my second project, for example, was an app which would reconcile PDF invoices with transactions from a bank account, right? So I needed to understand how to parse a CSV, right, which is what you download from your bank statement, and try to get it into a generalized schema, which I could put into a database. And at the same time, then I had to work with LLMs to, today this is easier, but 1 year ago, not so much, to take, PDFs and, translate them into like a generalized JSON, right? And kind of compare the two to like reconcile them, right? And kind of make a database structure which made sense to all of this, right? The other thing I worked a lot on was learning how to deploy things in like more complex systems. So very often, if you go on YouTube, the classical YouTubers are going to suggest you to, deploy on some very user-friendly platforms such as Vercel or, any of these platforms. Truth is that you're abstracting away a lot of complexity, which is though very important to learn. DevOps engineering, I think it's one of the most important parts of the job. It's what allows you to build scalable applications, right? And it's what any real enterprise is going to use eventually, right? Just because like Vercel or like one of these other products don't really scale as well or don't give you the same level of control, right? Just because they are purposely made to simplify the experience, right? Then there's a whole topic with AI, of course. So for sure, I see now a lot of my friends who are learning how to code who are like, they are vibe coding entire applications, right? And they have no clue where their code starts and ends, right? And I say that Cursor is a wonderful tool. I use it every day. However, at least I had the luck to start learning how to code when there was not yet Cursor, right? And I would suggest to anybody who starts to learn without it, right? So just have plain VS Code. Do use ChatGPT to help you out and like learn concepts, and like really when you don't find solution to a bug, do use it, right? Because it's useful and like will save you certain time, right? But be cautious to not overuse. Otherwise, you're just gonna have like like many files of code, and you have no idea what's going on. You're completely confused, and it's just a mess, right? And you're gonna feel as if you are the slave of the AI, right, rather the one in control of it. And so that's a very dangerous line not to trespass, I would say. But if you can keep that kind of balance and you focus on everything which is very much database, backend, DevOps, right, at the very beginning, and then you learn like front end, and the other, let's say, fancy stuff, as I like to call it, towards the end, right, you're going to get very, very quickly to a very high level, I would say. And then the other important thing is like find some mentors, find some skilled engineers who give you some very hard projects. So to do up is first for the beginning, but then you got to actually start building some harder stuff, right? Stuff that uses databases to a higher degree, and trying to think a bit more of the architecture of your application, and all of these kind of things.
Yeah, but like, what is the link then with the building of the startup? Because right now I'm also doing a course of Python, but
Right.
actually I don't get the point what is, because of course, like I now I'm using Python for statistics, so of course it is in that field, and I'm not getting like how it can like help me in building maybe a project of the startup. Because if I have the idea, then what's the point of using also all these technical tools?
Well, how are you going to realize your idea otherwise?
So, like you're saying that you use data in order to see if it's like it's gonna help, like if it's helpful what I'm doing or not, like the
Um,
project.
Wait, I'm not sure if I understood. What do you mean exactly?
No, like I didn't get what you said now. Like you
Yeah.
said that you're
Yeah,
gonna
well,
use,
like you mean like why it's important to learn databases or this kind
no,
of
like
thing?
how to use this data in order to like realize then a
Oh,
certain.
to build your application, right? To build your application,
Ah, okay, okay, right.
right?
Mm.
I mean, of course, like well, what I talked about, right, is like it's more of a journey for you to learn, right, how to build an application, right, and like build very data intensive applications, right. So, but of course, if you're able to build this application, you're also able to build much simpler ones, right, which is probably what you require for the MVP of your startup, right? For sure.
Mm.
I mean, of course, all of what I've talked about is definitely not useful to building your MVP at the beginning, right?
And okay, okay.
Because there's tools like Lovable, right? We just get something out of the box right out, right? And why not? Why not use that?
And which
But
resources do you suggest, like now, maybe for young entrepreneurs that would like to start, also understand how to code, given that there are plenty of resources, people, communities
so
nowadays?
resources, that's a good one. So there's a good website called roadmap.sh. Basically, they have a bunch of roadmaps. I think the roadmaps are not very interesting per se, but inside the roadmaps, they have a little button called projects. And in projects, they actually put some very interesting projects. And actually, I would just suggest people who start to learn to go from beginner, intermediate, advanced, right, and just try to do as many of these projects as possible. And I think that if you're able to do already some of the advanced projects, you get to already a pretty good level.
Okay, thank you so much. And what about what you're doing now, like at Stagsing? What
Sure.
are you doing, and what message would you give to the people that are listening, only to have inspiration of what they could do in the future in this sector?
Sure. So, I mean, like my aim is of course to to build startups, right, and to build my own as well. I would say that you know working at a startup, but like a serious startup, right? Because there's a very clear distinction between serious and not serious startups, right? So serious startups are those which hustle every day, and which make incredible things happen under incredible times, right? There are not so serious ones who yeah, this Friday, let's go to the lake, and enjoy life, and like they don't really put so much effort into it, and they're most likely working on some of the ideas I spoke about before, like startup ideas, right? And most likely the team, like is not as exceptional, right? So, and a great experience at the beginning is working in a serious startup, right? Because in a serious startup you're gonna learn an enormous amount of things, right? Especially so if it's a Y Combinator startups, because I would say that one of the things that set them apart is that they have an incredible pressure, because they have so many peers, who are they're raising a lot of money, they're doing incredible, revenue goals, they're growing super fast, right? So of course they want to be at the same par, right? So they will have an extreme sense of urgency and pressure. And I think you need to have that too and experience that such that you have it also in your same startup. It will make you learn a tremendous amount about the industry that's whatever that startup is in, and that's usually a very, very good place to find undiscovered problems and ideas that somebody has not yet tackled. And it's actually how the story of most Y Combinator founders found their idea, right? So they were working at company X or at startup X, and they were working with this customer. And while working with this customer, they actually noticed like a very peculiar thing that this customer kept telling them about, which is actually a massive undiscovered mine of gold in terms of problems, right? And startups come from problems. You will learn a great amount in whatever technical or non-technical thing you're doing, and you're gonna learn like how to work at speed, right? So like with real execution speed, right? Not just I clock in at 9, I finish at 5, I take some coffee breaks. No, 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 none of that is true. You really like you work at full speed.
And
So
sorry, would you suggest to start working? Sorry, Eric, we should start working in startups with not a lot of employees, or with a lot of employees and maybe a startup that has
um,
already gained traction? What would you
well,
suggest in order to start?
either is good, I would say. They're gonna probably teach you different things. At the beginning, probably they will teach you more about probably if they're very early with few employees, it's likely that they're still validating their idea, right? So you will probably have to pivot a lot, right? And that's a learning in itself. If it's later down the line and they have more employees, so uh, it's not a direct correlation, but I would say it's more likely that they're closer to product market fit, right? Most likely they will teach you different things, as in like how to scale our product, right? What are the winning tactics in sales, for example, right? Because gonna have to figure out that sales formula, right? What are how are we gonna manage now a bigger hierarchy, right? And a lot of fun things to learn. And actually, just to your previous question, so what I'm doing currently at Saxing, so I'm there a founding engineer, and basically what we do there is we basically help to connect all of these, very boring, very complex to connect enterprise systems such as Salesforce, a database of choice, an accounting system, like all of these systems that enterprises have, right? And they want to have the data of one system into another one, right? And this is a very hard problem. And most engineers, like at companies, spend sometimes years developing solutions which are super scrappy. And we basically just make it easy for them, just with a drag and drop no code interface. So this is basically what we do. And the great learning experience here is that, of course, we are still, like, I think we're kind of reaching now a bit better to our product vision, right? Which is great. And at the same time, we're learning a lot about how to automate and how to scale our sales machine, right? And this is something I had no insight about before, right? And actually, like, there's so much, even just about like engineering your sales, right? And how to scale also your engineering team. So just crazy learning experience. So I would
And
recommend.
what are you learning about this? Tell us about this scaling experience. Do you find
So,
any ways?
100%. So, well, one of the things I think we've perfected over time, and I mean, this is mostly a CEO working it. So, of course, I just know by looking at what he does is, your sales pitch changes a lot, right? So our sales pitch initially was something like, oh, we offer you this amazing, super scalable solution, right? That allows you to synchronize data, right? And like all of, and blah, 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 feature, right? Now we have changed completely our pitch. And now it starts very differently. It starts, hi, company name. Do you have this problem? Yes. And do you have it on this system? Oh, yes. And is it really especially hard because of this X thing? Oh, yes, actually, that's really true. And do you have trouble also connecting this thing with this other thing? Oh, actually, yeah, you're right? And how much do you think like your employees are, because of the lack of this, they're spending a lot of time writing this out. How much is that costing you? Well, now that you make me think about it, it's actually a lot of money, right? Well, that's great, because actually we have solved this problem for you. Let me introduce you to StackSync. And so our pitch has changed dramatically, right? And we were very solution focused, right? Like very about the ins and outs of our product, describing every little feature, but like very often people and your company, they just care about one specific feature for them, right? And maybe everything else is really not interesting to them, right? So if you start problem first, right, and you kind of get them to answer yes to all of these like sequences of question, by the end they will be super convinced that you're an expert on their problem, right? And I would say this was one of the biggest things I learned, at least on the sales side.
That's so interesting. Like that's what's most important, like to find the problem and give the solution. So this is what lots of people actually
of course.
forget.
Mhm.
And do you have like more projects for the future or something that you would like to do? Any
Or like
plan?
right now you want to maybe continue there and see where
It
also, of
leads.
course.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm learning still a lot, right? And also about a lot of interesting problems. So I would, my plan is for now to continue there for a little while at least, and learn more about problems, and now we're also building this workflows product, which maybe some of you know Zapier, which is this integration tool, where you can create kind of this chain of actions, right? And I'm building this, and I think it's going to become really super powerful, actually. So I'm very excited for that. So yeah, this is right now my plan. But I think the coming future, not too soon for now, I will also be building something of my own. But that not spoiling anything for now, but something cool is gonna happen soon.
And do you have like any tips maybe for like getting into one of like those rocket ships, or like increasing your sources of luck? Like maybe, I don't know, going to the website of Y Combinator to see all the like job positions that are
100%.
available there,
So,
kind of like networking with other friends in tech.
100%. So I would say make your links really good, right? So you gotta treat, like, if you were to do a startup, you would polish your landing page to the max, right? You would put all of the SEO keywords, right? Like you would put all of the nice pictures, all of the nice things, right? And I would say do exactly the same for yourself, right? So polish your GitHub profile really well, right? Like make sure that you showcase your most impressive projects, right? Maybe do even like a little README file, right? Showing like, hey, I'm this and this. I'm super passionate about this specific area, right? And solving the problems in this sector. And I've built these projects which are impressive because of XYZ, right? And perhaps even have a website, right, where you regularly post what you do, post on Twitter a lot. Eric, you do this. I see always your posts, right? So Twitter is exactly where Twitter lives and where most of San Francisco lives. So post there as much as you can, right? Post on Hacker News. This is something very little known. Actually, Hacker News is one of the greatest places to get traction. Very often, a couple of posts from Hacker News have converted into sometimes like thousands and thousands of dollars in revenue. So very great return on that.
I remember there was like one about Dropbox, right? That they posted the idea there, and then everybody was hating. Yeah, this is never gonna work. That's bullshit. And then I mean, we all know Dropbox today.
Right, indeed. And even though oftentimes you meet these kind of personalities on a Hacker News, you're still going to be boosted massively. So and as they say, there's no bad publicity, right? So and that's especially true, I would say there. The other thing is try to like if you apply to jobs, right? Like a very good tip that I got some time ago was don't just like there's always going to be somebody who comes from more prestigious universities, has higher grades, has like some more impressive names, right? So it's very difficult to win this kind of credential battle. So what I would do is for any company you apply, make a personalized demo of a product that you think they would find interesting, right? So I don't know if you're applying for, like a company that does, software for accounting, for example, right? Build a little MVP of something that solves your VAT, right? Or like a minor something that could be a feature in their product, right? And like and when I see this, like I'm super impressed, right? So wow, the person has taken time, has shown me they have the skills, right? So actually like already the risk that is derived by me thinking that they don't have the skills is already vanished, right? Because I saw exactly what they did. They took the time to actually study my company, think what would be a feature, right? I mean, they've already started the work, even me before hiring them, right? So it's great to do that, right? So personalized demos, like absolutely like cheat codes to getting into impressive companies, right? And also, of course, make sure to always reach out on LinkedIn, right? And kind of like portray your story, right? So for me, it was I come from a different background, but I'm super hard motivated. I did this projects, I won this competitions, and I think I could really add value to your company because of X, right? Like, would it be available even just for a 5-minute chat to convince you, right? And what's 5 minutes? Most people are nice; they will give you 5 minutes, right? And then you have the next call, right? And if they don't answer, well, the next day you send them a message again and again and again and again until they answer, right? So really hammer them until they give you any kind of feedback, and like don't give them the option to just not respond, right? And I think like this, you're very likely to increase your surface area of like massively. Of course, go to San Francisco, right? Even just on my 2 weeks there, the first time I went, I met 3 people who then one of these 3 people offered me to invest in my company at the time, right? In just a 2 weeks trip, right? A 2 weeks trip, right? Which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Go there, meet a lot of friends, try to get into circles. I mean, the Silicon Valley Fellowship, of course, is something I can recommend, which I've seen in first person. Go to all of these, meetups where you find people interested in AI and any topic of tech, right, or any type of problem. Get out there, network like crazy, right? So these are the kind of things which help eventually. Getting a certificate in data science, perhaps not, right? I don't know, like doing all of these things which like get you more credentials. Most unless it's like a really like industry credential, such as working at an impressive company that does something cutting edge, right? Unless doing that, everything else is kind of like you're playing a game which does not really benefit you and is not really going to get you forward in any meaningful way, I would say. Sorry, that was a lot, but
Thank you so much.
No,
So
really, thank you very much. You gave lots of insights, and I think that, of course, you're going to inspire all our listeners.
Hope so.
It's on the fact that the skills are what matters, like knowing how to do things and not focus only on
Exactly.
the courses and
To take a degree.
yes,
100%.
that's important
Yeah.
too, obviously, but it's not only the thing that matters in real life. So thank you also for sharing that.
No, for sure, 100%.
And yes,
Thank you
Noel,
very much, Dan Oliviero.
Of
Really,
course.
thank you very much. And
we'll see you in San Francisco maybe because we're coming this.
Yeah, you know, and if any of the viewers, you know, have any questions, you know, or like even about tech or like, you know, where to start about learning, right? Or like need any tips, you know, like you can find me on LinkedIn and like feel free to send me a message.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Dan.
Oliviero.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Ciao, guys.
Bye.